welcome. Thank you for taking the time out of your no doubt busy days. Appreciate you all giving us an hour of your time. So hopefully, from this side, we can at least make that, a valuable use of your time. My name's Sam Shannon. I'm the Managing Director and Founder of Incubeta in Australia. Most of you are either existing clients or we've worked with you previously, so you have a good understanding of who we are. But for those of you who don't know who we are a full service or a full stack GMP partner. We're in over 22 countries around the world now, and we're one of the 4 global partners with Google. In terms of the Australian market, some of the clients that we work with include the likes of the iconic Koala, IAG, which includes NRMA, CGU, Les Mills we look after globally, Rebel Sport, Calvin Klein, Tommy Hilfiger, Fantastic Furniture, Freedom Furniture, a lot of big brands. However, we also do work with early stage startups and smaller businesses as well. Anyway, that's enough about Incubeta, enough about myself. Just wanted to introduce you to Rod Jacka. Rod is a bit of an icon in terms of analytics. So Rod was actually the first ever analytics certified individual in Australia and one of the first 15 certified globally. So maybe I'm giving away Rod's age, but he's a bit of a pioneer with over 20 years experience. And Rod will be leading today's session. He's the head of our analytics of the business, and he'll be, guiding you through today's presentation. So without further ado, I will pass you over to Rod. Over to you, mate.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for the warm introduction, Sam. And it's amazing to see so many people on the call today. This is a big topic, and Google Analytics has been a very large part of our life. In fact, it's been a considerable part of my professional life, counting probably more years than I wish to count under this product. So as Sam mentioned, that I was the first person in Australia to be certified by Google. I was the Urchin reseller in Australia when Google acquired Urchin and took over the platform to turn it into Google Analytics. So a lot of us probably felt a little sad when came July and our data started to disappear from Google Analytics. It's a pretty sudden shock for some. And I know many of you on this call, you're probably still receiving data from Universal Analytics, but unfortunately that's going to go away fairly soon if it hasn't stopped for you already. Now that sadness, it's like the passing of a dear friend, somebody we've come to know and trust over many years. For a few of us, however, our reactions might have been a little bit more dramatic. It's a fairly big jump between Universal Analytics and Google Analytics 4. And a few of you have found a few bugs and a few frustrations and things. Now, just to setting the scene with this, you do recall, however, that the Universal Analytics platform was a platform that was developed for over 16 years. So it's a very mature product, very stable, and basically had reached the end of its workable life. Google Analytics 4 is a wonderful platform, and I'm going to encourage you that we need to rethink about this. And it's an opportunity that we can embrace. It's a platform that's only had 3 years of development, and there is a lot of good things in the pipeline. Some of the things I can talk about, some of the things I can't because it's all the NDA and we can't share that with the public. But there is a lot of good things coming in this platform. So I'm hoping after today's talk, you'll change your mind and actually think Google Analytics 4 is really cool. So what I'd like to talk about are 3 use cases where I feel that you can use Google Analytics 4 today to make a real difference in your marketing. Now, as we know, the landscape has changed dramatically. There are many things underfoot with the deprecation of cookies and the increase of privacy concerns and so forth, changes in browser technology that are making the way that we market very different. And it's going to change further in the future as these changes become rolled out in Chrome. Safari's already put in place a lot of changes that have kind of made it more challenging for digital marketers to reach their audience. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the techniques that we can use in Google Analytics 4 to improve our marketing and set the scene for the things that are to come. Now, the 3 use cases I'll work through today, we'll start off by talking about using first-party data in your marketing campaigns by ingesting that into the Google marketing platform via Google Analytics 4. We'll also talk about audiences and how we can activate this data and surface it in the platform and provide some use cases that you can use to use audiences straight away. And then lastly, I'll talk about ROAS. Now, I know many of you on this call are in the retail space, and you're going to say, look, why is he talking about this? I know ROAS. ROAS is our bread and butter. We live and die by this. Well, the reason I've introduced it today is I feel that there is a real need in the market to extend this concept to non-e-commerce websites. Now, we can introduce the idea of value to an event, like a conversion event in Google Analytics 4, and then we can use that to bid and structure our campaigns. So we can take the learnings that the e-commerce space is very familiar with and apply them to other verticals, perhaps like travel, perhaps like hospitality, automotive. There are many other use cases where we can apply a ROAS-based thinking to our marketing campaign. All right, let's get stuck in and look at first-party data integration. Now, how do we actually do this in Google Analytics 4? Firstly, what is first-party data? Well, first-party data is the data that people have contributed to our data warehouse through their activities and interactions with our business. There's also zero-party data, which is a concept I won't be exploring today, but would also fall under this umbrella, which is the data that users willingly give us through things like surveys and voice of customer. Now, we can use this to integrate with our marketing campaigns via Google Analytics 4. And there are three main ways that we can do that. Firstly, to import. We can send the data from our website, or we can integrate directly with our CRM platforms. So let's just have a quick look at each of these in turn. Now, probably the simplest and most accessible of these is the ability for us to import a CSV file directly into Google Analytics. Now, how does this work? Well, when a user browses your website, they will be given an identifier by Google Analytics. For this case, we'll call it the CID value, the cookie ID. You could also have them log into the website, in which case they have a user ID, which is a known addressable person in your database. And we can join data to these two mechanisms and import it into Google Analytics 4. And the sorts of data that we can import here, well, first things we can import cost data, which is not usually identifiable, and that's linked to your advertising campaigns. That can be used for the ROAS part of the talk, which I'll come to later. We can import extra data about the items that we're selling. If you're an e-commerce website, extending that to include extra attributes that can also be used in creating audiences and promoting those items elsewhere. But the one I want to talk about today is the user data, which is how can we import such data as loyalty, customer lifetime value, and other attributes that you don't get for free from implementing Google Analytics 4 by putting the tags on your website. Now, if we were to say, take a concept of a customer lifetime value, if you can look that up in your database and associate it with the user, you can then import that into Google Analytics 4 and store that as a user property. Now, for those that know the technical parts of this, user properties are a little bit like the user level scope dimensions we had in Universal Analytics, and they persist with the user over time. So if we set a value for the lifetime value of, say, a threshold, like they're a high, medium, or low, or a numerical value, we can then use that as a way of adding them to audiences to retarget those particular users with marketing treatments that can help nurture them and push them along a journey that we would hope they would take. And lastly, we can also import offline events. And this is also quite a useful one, because if we're going to bring in data about such things as did this user convert? Now, many use cases we have, not everybody sells online, of course. Many of these use cases mean that the actions actually happen somewhere else. And so we could use this data to import the conversion events, such as the sale had been closed. Let's take an automotive use case. They come into the dealership, the sale has been made, and as long as we have that CID value in the database and we can associate it with that customer, we can then import that into Google Analytics 4 as a conversion event that we can then use to target as an audience or to optimize our bidding strategies in the Google marketing platform. Whilst that's the easiest way, the more robust way of doing this is to actually send the data in real time to Google Analytics. And this is a technique that if you engage a company like Incubeta here to do your analytics, we'll be sending a lot of these code examples for your developers to implement, where we can send the user data directly into Google Analytics 4, and again, associating that with the user record. And we don't need to worry about looking things up at this point. It's happening automatically as the user is browsing the website. Same principles involved. It's a more streamlined process. It does require development, however. And then lastly, we can integrate directly with our CRM platform. Now, this is going to take a little bit more work, but it is a very powerful technique if your sales processes do involve the CRM. Automotive is a good use case. It could also be in the business-to-business sales leads, where we're looking at a lead generation form. A user fills out that form on behalf of their company. Maybe it's a trial of a particular piece of software. They then later are spoken to by the sales team. The sales team then close this deal and they become a customer. At that point, we can tell Google Analytics that this conversion event had happened. So how would we do this practically? Well, when the user completes their form, and let's for argument's sake, say it's a Salesforce form that's sitting on your website, but we could equally be a HubSpot form or a different CRM system altogether. We're going to store that cookie ID in the form as a hidden field. When that user submits the form, we're storing that in the database. And later on, when the salesperson converts that lead into a customer, we're moving them through the sales pipeline in the CRM. That can be a trigger to tell a tool, and Zapier would be a good one that you could use. It's an automated no-code platform for connecting different applications, to then send that data to Google Analytics via the measurement protocol to record a conversion event that this lead had now become a customer. We can extend that further to even provide the value of that event, which I'll talk about in a little while. Now, by doing that, we can then associate this with the conversion event and join that data back to the marketing campaigns. And using tools such as the data-driven attribution model that's built into Google Analytics 4 by default, we can then assign value of these events back to the campaigns. So if you're doing anything with offline sales, I do encourage you to look very carefully about this particular technique, because it's a very powerful technique to help better understand the true impact of your marketing on driving real business for your organization. So how do we do this now? So we've now got the data in Google Analytics. How do we actually activate it? Well, let's go through this in depth. So there's a stack of integrations that happen with Google Analytics 4 at the center. Google Ads is the logical one, because most of your advertising will be done using the Google Ads platform. So Google Analytics and Google Analytics 4 and Google Ads talk directly to each other, and we'll go through the process of using this shortly. But that's a really easy one to do. It's a few clicks of a button to integrate. If you're using Search Ads 360 or DV 360, Display Video 360, then those audiences can be used in those platforms to shape and set bid strategies or to target messaging to those particular clients. There are other integrations as well with Firebase. Firebase is a good example where we could use the audiences in this data to personalize the experience for those users of the app. So this would be pertinent to those having an app and a website. And then we could have in-app messaging, or we could structure a campaign to do some A/B testing to test different user experiences using this data. There's a range of different options here. This is effectively how this happens. So the audience export, so we can export the audiences to these different platforms. We can import the conversion events from Google Analytics 4 into those platforms and use those to optimize our bid strategy. And as mentioned before with Firebase, there are other opportunities to extend that to such things as A/B testing and personalization. So this is a summary. This is the kind of ecosystem and how it all glues together. I haven't really spoken in depth about BigQuery. The BigQuery platform, that little magnifying glass in the middle, is a prime way that we can extend this to do some very advanced activations with this data using machine learning and the BigQuery ML platform. That's beyond the scope of what I can talk to today, but building propensity models, for instance, based on a more advanced model would be a prime use case for the BigQuery platform. Okay. Now, this will allow us to set up strategies such as auto bidding to maximize conversions, and I'll talk about this with the ROAS-based bidding towards the end of the talk today, but also to understand our marketing based on the data-driven attribution models that are built in to Google Analytics 4 and other parts of the platform. We can also look at this with the engaged view conversions in YouTube, and the broader, more commonly, the remarketing of users that have visited our website across the digital ecosystem via the Google marketing platform, such as DV360. Okay, so let's dive into audiences in a bit more depth. Now, we have our classic funnel, of course, and we often talk as marketers about where does a particular campaign strategy lie. Is it upper funnel, mid funnel, or lower funnel, depending on the intent of what we're hoping to achieve with that campaign. Now, our audiences tend to fit largely into the consideration through conversion stage, because in order for the audience to be available to the Google marketing platform via Google Analytics 4, really the user has to have visited our website in most cases. So that awareness phase, we're bringing the users to the website, they're becoming aware of our offer, they're visiting our website or our apps as the case may be, and they are then in the consideration cycle. Now, we can design strategies here to help nurture those users along the path to becoming a customer or client of your organization. And audiences play a very large part of that, a large role in that process. So the sorts of things that we can use to build audiences are here on this screen. They're summarized on this screen. So the Google Signals is a key part. So that's data that's collected from your Google account, assuming you've set the permissions to do so, because it's not just given to Google for free. You actually have to allow the permissions to do this. And we can introduce such values as age, the interests, your advertising interests, and your gender into the mix there. And if I'm logged into Chrome, and as I am today, look, as I'm talking now, there's a little icon sitting up there in my top of my Chrome indicating I'm logged in, and that's setting my profile as a visible profile to Google, and Google can use that information based on my privacy settings to help target ads that suit my interests and intents. Now, it can extend that to the data that's collected on site as well. So the metrics, so how long did I spend on your website? Was there a certain event value threshold that I made? And I'll talk about event value again towards the end of the talk. It's an important concept. Or I can simply say the views of specific pages. So if I've got I'm a manufacturer, for instance, and I've got a product that I'm selling through a chain, where they've got, say, installers or distributors or wholesalers or however your value chain works for your business, I can use triggers of views of key pages as a metric to say that these users are interested in that product or service, and then use that as a way of building those audiences. If I'm actually sending direct events, we can take those events as well, such as the viewing of particular items, whether an item's added to cart, or whether I've viewed specific content within a web page, again, as triggers to put me into a particular audience as a user. And we spoke earlier about our user data, so we can ingest that first-party data, such as lifetime value, the last data purchase, the loyalty membership tier, and so forth. And whilst it's a really old technique, and many on retail will know this well, which we talk about recency, frequency, monetary segmentation, it plays into this very, very well if we can load that data into Google Analytics 4, so we can put people that are high spenders, spend frequently, and put them into the high group, and those people who have spent infrequently or not at all in a low group. So it gives us a very powerful way of slicing our addressable audiences into smaller units that we can target our messaging towards. Now, this works in the following way. And so for those that are not familiar, I'm just going to give you a quick tour through how we do this in practice. And hopefully you'll take this away and use it in your marketing campaigns going forward. So we have the option of creating audiences in a custom way. We can use template audiences. So there are templates that Google have provided in the Google Analytics 4 platform. And if you are in a particular vertical, and travel is a good example, you will be given suggested audiences where Google have done some templates specific to the industry that will also help you out in using those audiences. Our time today will focus on doing them with a custom audience, and I'll come through those in a moment. Now, when we start to design and construct our audiences, we need to give some thought about how we're going to do this. And these are the 4 variables that we need to think about when building out an audience. Firstly, we want to talk about the scope. Is this an audience we're wanting to just work on where they've only done a few interactions recently, or is it something they have done at any point in time? For argument's sake, if we're thinking about a purchase, is the fact they've made one purchase sufficient, or do we need multiple purchases? When do we want this to occur? The more powerful of these, of course, are sequences, where we say that there's a particular sequence of events that we want a particular user to go through to qualify for membership with this audience. And the example I'll give shortly, which is a user purchasing and then returning to the website within 7 days, which is a segue to our next point of the time windowed metrics, because we can use that to say that there is a limit to how long we want this to appear, how long we want this event to be valid for. And that example I've just said there, that the user must have visited within 7 days of coming to the website. And of course, excluding people from the audience is just as valuable as including them. So we have a criteria to sort of say when they hit this and do these sorts of actions, we're kicking them out of the audience because we no longer want them in that audience. So let's go through some workable examples. So you'll find audiences in Google Analytics 4 under your administration area. Click on the audiences button to go and visit that area, and then you click on the new audience button to create one. When you do, you're prompted with a wizard that asks you to select whether you wish to do this as a custom audience, which is what we'll talk about today, or to use these general templates or predictive audiences. And you'll see in some cases there will be suggested audiences which will appear like this. So if you're in the travel industry and you've set up your vertical, so that little what does your website sell setting is really important if you want this. So if you've said that your site is a travel site, then you will see these suggested audiences. And you can use a reference guide there. So just giving you a bit of a head start. So if you click on the demographics one, you'll get demographics information prompted. So it kind of saves a little bit of time there. But for today, we're going to focus on building out a custom audience. And the first one I'm going to do is a no-brainer, because this is the easiest audience in the world to create. You're getting it for free. The moment you send Google Analytics for a purchase event, and pretty much every retailer does, you have a purchasers audience appearing in your Google Analytics 4 account. Now, this is a valuable audience for 2 reasons. We can use this to either exclude users or to include them. And I'll take you through the exclude users use case in a moment, because we might want to say that we prefer not to buy the same customer twice. We might want to sort of use our marketing budget elsewhere. And so once a customer's purchased, we want to suppress the advertising being shown to those users, at least for a while. So how do we do that? Well, the first thing you'll need to do is to link your Google Ads. And to do that, you log into your Google Analytics account, into the admin, and providing that you are an administrator of both Google Ads and of Google Analytics, you'll simply just push on the link button and select the appropriate Google Ads account. If you don't have those permissions yourself, it's just probably a matter of finding the right people who do in the organization and going through this process. It only needs to be done the once, and once it's done, you can do the rest. Now, when you're in Google Ads and you have already linked it, it's probably wise to check that everything's working correctly. And so you can then go into the audience manager in Google Ads to find just to confirm that your data source is appearing. Now, Google Ads is changing at the moment. Some of you using Google Ads will see the new user interface, which is the one appearing in the center. Others may see the old user face, which is the one appearing to the left. Both of them have similar navigation structures, and what you're looking for are the audience manager under the shared library heading. Once you're there, click on the Your Data Sources to confirm that Google Analytics 4 is connected correctly, and you should start to see the lists appearing there if your audiences have been set up. Now we can then use an exclude audience. So in this case, I'm just looking at excluding it generally across all campaigns. It's a little bit of a broad approach, but perhaps it illustrates the point. Now to find your exclusions audiences, you'll click on the audiences in the left-hand nav, and you'll see it towards the bottom of the screen. You can see that there's an exclusions tab there. Once you have clicked on the add exclusions, you'll be prompted to select the campaign or ad group that you wish to apply the exclusion to. And then you can search for purchases under the list of audiences. Once you've checked that box and click save, it's going to exclude that audience from your campaign. So again, why would we do this? We're really looking to free up some budget there and deploy it to somewhere where we feel is more valuable to get a bigger bang for a buck from our advertising dollar. Okay, moving on. The next one was the example of the recently purchased visit audience. In which case we're adding criteria that not only have they purchased, but they must have also had within 7 days a session start event firing. So using a compounding criteria. So first one, we've already got the purchaser. We're creating a new audience that has exactly the same criteria, but we're now adding the fact that coming back to the website within 7 days as a criteria. When you start your session on a website, Google Analytics 4 sends an event, which is a session start, and we can use that as the trigger to put these users into this audience. And we might have a different offer for these people. So we may want to say, look, by the way, thank you very much for your recent purchase. Send another offer through the media. We might be trying to incentivize them to their next purchase. If that could be in the form of a coupon, it could be in the form of some other treatment that is a special offer for that particular audience. Now, if we're seeing that through display advertising, it gives us the opportunity to gain these users awareness when they're visiting other websites that they're interested in, because they're not necessarily actively searching for this same product again or related products from your company. So it is a great way of grabbing people's attention once they've completed that initial purchase. But we don't want to do that for everybody. We only want to do that where they're showing an interest in further purchases. And so hence this extra criteria of having returned to have a second session within that 7-day windowing. I do encourage you, by the way, I'm not sure if I did call this out earlier, but there is a questions here. We will be having questions at the end. So there's a questions button that appears towards the bottom of your screen. So do start compiling your questions and popping them in the list, and I'll be addressing those towards the end. Okay, so coming back on track here, there is a technique that's probably not commonly known, which is you can also use the membership of an audience to trigger an event. And why would we bother doing that? Well, that's an interesting question. If I trigger this as an event, I can send this as a conversion event to Google Analytics 4, and in turn, that becomes available as a conversion event in Google Ads. And I can then optimize my marketing to maximize, I can optimize my bidding strategy to maximize those events. So for the campaigns that are related to this, I can then use this audience membership to target and use this as a conversion event. So it kind of gives me something I can bid towards to get the optimal outcome. I'll also draw your attention here to the membership duration. So we can set the time that users spend in these audiences based on that setting. So in this case, this particular one is the default, which is 30 days, but I may want to make this a very narrow window of just a day or two, just to limit the scope of when this audience is live for that particular user. And then lastly, I just want to call out that we have also a whole bunch of machine learning smarts in Google Analytics 4. And if you are a retailer with a volume of purchases, there is a certain threshold you need to achieve in order for the machine learning model to have valid outcomes. So you'll see that you'll get a ready to use green tick if you've hit that threshold, and you'll see the red not eligible to use if you have not hit that threshold. I think it's from memory 1,000 conversions a day, I think, but I may need to check my facts on that one. In this case, what Google Analytics 4 is doing is it's calculating a propensity score for all the other users that have come to your website. And if that propensity score is of a sufficient level, it will put you into this audience. And in this case, we're selecting that we have a probability of between 90 and 100% of future purchase intent. Now, let's say we don't want to go anybody that's got 100% probability, because we don't want to target those ones because we're going to get them anyway. We might lower that and say, look, let's just do those in the range of, say, 70 to 90%, to nudge them, give them that little bit of extra incentive and reminder just to come back and consider us again. This is, again, a very valid strategy for how we might target these users to push them along the sales pipeline. Okay, so moving on, and I'm just mindful, I'm covering a lot today in a very short time, but I'm trying to maximize the value of time. But if any of these things are of interest, please do follow up with us after the call. Now let's talk about ROAS and return on ad spend. Now, for those that are not in retail, because as I said, our retailers will know this. Like this is not rocket science in the retail space. So return on ad spend is a metric that's commonly used for campaign performance. And the higher the ROAS, generally, the more effective your marketing dollar is working to drive revenue. And the formula is total revenue divided by advertising cost. So if we're making sales of $2 million and it costs us $500,000 in advertising, your ROAS would be 4. And those in the retail space would say that that's a pretty low number, because if your margins are 50%, a ROAS of 4, you're probably not making a lot of money on that. So you really need to keep your margins a little higher. So you're looking at ROAS as hopefully 10 or plus in the retail space, often closer to 15 to 20. But what if your website doesn't sell anything or your sales happen offline? Well, there is a way we can do this. So let's think this through. So if we go through and work through what is the sales process, how does our marketing fit into this? So we're going to work at our touch points. Now, when we get those touch points and we write them all down, we can start to think about what's the value of each of these touch points in driving the business. Now, if we find that some of these are sufficiently valuable, we would then create a measurement plan mapping these to conversion events. And just to pause on that for a moment, so let's think about it as a software as sales model. We've got a software product that works on a subscription basis. We have a free subscription, we have a paid subscription. In this model, our ROAS may be based on the fact that we have the initial trial. Now that's a free, it's a free service, it's a free platform, so they can go from the trial and still have a free outcome. But we know that we'll convert maybe 1 in 20 of those free accounts into a paid account. And a paid account has an average value of, I don't know, let's say $2,000. So we know that we convert 1 in 20 of them into a $2,000 value. Well, each of those conversions for a free account would be in theory worth $100 to us. And we could put that as a value for a free trial sign up. And then we could add that as our conversion value to those events and then use that as our ROAS model, which I'll look a bit more in depth at how we do this technically in a moment. Now, the key thing here that you really need to remember, and I'll reinforce it in the next slide, is we need to actually add in some value to our events. And we need to also add in the currency. This is a little gotcha because you think, okay, I'll just put in 50, it'll record it. No, it's not. You've got to do 50 and the actual currency. So you need to say AUD if it's Australian, or if it's USD if you're working in USD dollars, and so forth. Now, once you've done this and this is all working correctly, you then need to import these as conversion events into Google Ads. You can then set your bidding strategy to focus on conversion value, and then you can use the target ROAS model to hit the target ROAS that you're interested in. So this is what I'm talking about in practice. So this is a screenshot from Google Tag Manager. And when we set up a conversion event here, in this case, it's an inquiry form, we have said that we think an inquiry form is worth $50. So we need to set the currency to AUD, as I mentioned, or the local currency if it's not AUD, and a value of 50. And that will then mean that this is available in Google Ads as a $50 conversion. Let's say we've got something that's a little bit lower. So we're maybe looking at an engagement score. So calculating a score when the user's done a certain number of actions. And this is a technique that we've successfully employed in many clients where, for argument's sake, we actually don't have a lead gen form. And we're really just looking to provide information. So how do we estimate the value of a user that's done a number of tasks? Well, we can calculate that out behind the scenes and then give them a score when they hit a certain threshold. We tell this is an engaged lead, and we give that a score of 20. Again, we probably need a lot more of these to get that ROAS model working, but it's a very valid technique in quantifying the actual commercial value of engagement on a website. We would then import these conversions into Google Ads and then set our bidding strategy to maximize conversion value. And when you do this, there is an option to set a target ROAS, and I've just picked a number here for the sake of it on this slide of 266%. So if we say this is a 2.6 2.6 ROAS model, that's the target we're working towards. And then Google will run its magic with its machine learning algorithms and all the other stuff that goes on behind the scenes to convert your advertising dollars into these outcomes. Now, bidding is fine. I mean, that's all very interesting, of course, but we also want to do some reporting on it. Now, unfortunately, Google Analytics 4 doesn't surface event value as a ROAS model yet. I suspect it'll happen in the future. It does happen for if you're using purchase, but if you're using an event value, it doesn't surface it. So you do need to do a little bit of work. And Looker Studio is a great platform to do it. Very simple report. And if anybody would like one of these, just reach out and I'll send you a template that you can use. But to do it yourself is very straightforward. You can see the formula there in your Looker Studio calculation, which is just basically event value divided by ads cost. Now that was all good. And we talked about Google advertising, but what if you use other platforms, and how do you get that data into Google Analytics so you can do the same thing? Well, in that case, we can import their cost data. So thinking back to our integration of the first party data section, one of those things that we can import is cost data. And we can bring in your Facebook, Pinterest, TikTok, etc. I'm not quite sure, do you call it Twitter anymore? Do you call it X? I've lost track of that. But anyway, you can bring in the campaign data you've got from them with the cost and then import that into Google Analytics. So the next steps. So this has all been a bit of a broad brush stroke, and we've only had a short time together today. But I just want to set the scene for sort of things that you can be doing. But if it is interesting to you and you'd like to pursue it further, I do encourage you to reach out to us, because we do this every day for our clients. And we can help you with getting more out of Google Analytics 4. And obviously there's this whole audit. We want to make sure everything's working. We've got a lot of work right now to say, okay, we've put Google Analytics 4 on, it's not working as we expected. How do we get this back to where we had it? We certainly do that, and that's something that I can encourage you to talk to us about. We can help you in training and support and using the platform, and we can set up Looker Studios and custom reporting. And we are also a Google Analytics 360 sales partner. And if you are interested in that platform and looking at how you might use the SLA, so why would you want to buy it? Well, so you've got reliability and making sure that you can actually have a partner that can support you actively with the product. But do talk to us if you'd like to organize that call. We'd love to chat to you. Now, with that, I'd like to open up for questions. Great, let me just have a look at what we've got. Okay, so how would we target? So one of our questions is, the first one we've got is, how do we calculate the target ROAS? Well, that's an it depends answer, but a little bit of business modeling goes a long way. In a retail world, you work backwards from your margins. So if you're selling a product for a markup of 100%, you've got 50% is going to be your maximum that you could spend on overheads. Now, you really wouldn't want to do a ROAS of 2 then, because that would be a ROAS of 2. That 50% turns to a 200% return, because you spend all your money on advertising and you'd make no money because you've got nothing to pay the staff and everything else. So what we really need to do is understand the gross margin that's available in the business and then work backwards from that. Generally speaking, the thinner the margin, the higher the ROAS. So if we work on, say, a 5% of your available gross profit is available for advertising, well, then your ROAS would be closer to 25. Depending on what would it be, 5 to 20, you'd have a ROAS of 20. So it's a little simple calculation, just backwards from your margins. So if you're working in a more abstract way about the value of leads, if you can estimate the lifetime value of a customer as an average and then work backwards from that. Okay, great. Okay, all right. So a few other questions coming in here. Another one, customize the existing reporting in GA4 to include the e-commerce conversion rate. Yes, you can. It is there. It's quite possible to do it. You've just got to go in and actually edit the template, add in either the session conversion rate or the user conversion rate. Then when you're actually in the report, there's a little gotcha. You need to actually select the conversion event for purchase. It's a good topic, and it's probably worth a little exploration of e-commerce and how we can optimize Google Analytics for e-commerce. And that may be a good topic for our next webinar, which I'm still planning for at the moment. Okay, next question. So when we create a trigger in Google Analytics 4 to group all the target users into an event, will the event only exist in the GA4 hit, or can it be used as a custom event in GTM? Okay, all right, that's an interesting one. I'm going to have to give that a bit more thought. So the GA4 event, I'm assuming I'm going to take this and read it as the fact that when we've used the entry of the user into an audience and we've sent that conversion event, can we feed that back into Google Tag Manager as a custom event? At this point, I'm going to say no. It would possibly be doable from BigQuery and so forth, but not directly. I don't think that use case is directly supported. Okay, next question. Can Google Analytics 4 audiences be linked to Meta or other campaign platforms such as Insta or Facebook? Unfortunately, not at this stage, because the identifiers that are being used are specific to Google Analytics. They have no meaning in those environments. That said, if there are third-party platforms that you're working with CDPs, we have seen other clients, and I'll call out Telium as a good use case here, where we can use the integration with Telium and other CDPs as the conduit to trigger those audiences elsewhere. It's a lot more complicated, though. It's not a quick turnkey solution. It does require a fair bit of work. Next question is, how many audiences can we create? That's a good question. So we can create, I think from memory, 200 audiences in the free platform, and that expands out to a much larger number if you're purchasing the Google Analytics 360 platform. So this is a key reason why you'd think about Google Analytics 360 if you're doing a lot of different things. You need more custom dimensions and metrics, or you need more audiences. It's the allocation of that. So for the free product from memory, I'll have to check my facts on this. I do believe it's 200. Great, and I think I've got one more question. All right, so then probably only got time for one more question because we're slightly over time. It looks like Salesforce connection was possible. And if we're looking at this for audience creation, is this data refreshed in real time? Yes, if you were a Google Analytics 360 customer with Universal Analytics, there was a native integration of Salesforce with Universal Analytics. I'm not certain how much I can say on that publicly, but I will say that that is certainly something that's being considered for reinstatement. So in the future, it's likely to be there, but I can't really commit to that because it's not publicly released. All right, I'll take one more question, and then there's a couple more just popped in. I'll take one more question, and I think we'll need to call it a day because we're slightly over time. Okay, so trying to track organic performance of content from different channels, so from organic search, organic social, what's the best way of seeing that? For example, I want to see how well I'm doing at organic search for all my content that's categorized as Sydney. Okay, that's a really good use case. So let's break it apart. So there's two parts. There's the traffic and the entry pages, and then there's the categorization of those into groupings. So with your categorization, I'll tackle that first because there's some housekeeping to do there. I would encourage you to look at the content group variable. So if you're setting the content group parameter, if we're setting that and you have a value in that, that gives us the data that we need to group the content. The channels and the relationship of the channels to the landing page can be done. It currently can be done as an exploration report. And if you're looking at the session traffic source, if you're using that as your base, and there's three different types of ways of looking at traffic data in Google Analytics 4. The session one is the closest to what you'd be seeing in Universal Analytics. the first user one, which you'll see first user session, first user channel group, first user source medium, etc., is a first click model. So that's the first campaign that required that particular user. And of course, when you go into the advertising reports, you look at the data-driven model. And this does not apply to that because that only works under a limited number of use cases. Yeah, so traffic one is the one you want. And I would combine the traffic source medium or traffic default channel grouping for session. They use two terms, so it's a little bit confusing. You may see it written as session or you may see it written as traffic depending on where you're seeing it. But we're after the session default channel grouping combined with your landing page. Limit that to your organic search or your organic social, and that'll give you the landing pages. And if you combine that with that content group, it'll help you to narrow it down to just those pages that related to Sydney. So definitely doable, definitely possible. With that, I think we need to draw our day to an end. So I thank you all for your time. And if there's any questions at all, please reach out to us afterwards. We'd love to have a chat. Back to you, Sam.
Thanks, Rod. Firstly, huge thank you to Rod, as always, very informative. Almost felt like I was back at uni then for a session, but very well, thank you. And guys, just to reiterate, thank you for taking the time out and giving us an hour of your day. If you do have any questions in relation to analytics or any of the other GMP properties, feel free to reach out, and we're more than happy to provide assistance. Thanks once again, and thank you, Rod.
Excellent. Thanks, everybody.
Cheers, guys.